Hi guys, I'm so glad that you're here. Welcome to the channel and welcome to another video. Thank you so much for your positive feedback with the pizza video. So there'll definitely be more videos from us. Sorry that I haven't been putting videos out there for a few weeks. I sort of wanted to take a break because this whole channel is supposed to be about authenticity and vulnerability, about being real about the struggles of life but also the joys, because I'm a perfectionist by nature. I'm not super organized or anything like that. When I'm doing projects like this, I like to make it as good as I can, and I'd find I'd be sitting in my room for hours filming videos and just getting it just right. It really took the pleasure out of it, and so this video is hopefully going to be like videos to come where I'm not so concerned about, oh, is everything just right in the background, because obviously that's important, but it takes away from the joy of it and it makes me want to make videos less, if that makes sense. But anyway, as you can see, my hair is all gone. My housemate Emanuele did it with some scissors, and the videos, well, we filmed it for the channel. I have to say it's banging content, and maybe that footage will be featured a bit later on in the channel. It probably will, but I really felt that I wanted to do this next video about racism, about the conversation that has been so much in the fore recently. I'm definitely not an expert in it by any stretch of the imagination. I've been learning so much over the past few weeks, but my heart is just to stand alongside all of those who are raising their voices to talk about the injustices that are so much part of our society. I know that there's a wide range of people who watch these videos, but I know predominantly it's people who are either white or maybe Asian who are watching these videos. A lot of my friends who I've been speaking to who are white sort of feel a bit like, oh, I don't know how to approach this issue and I don't know where to start. I just wanted to make this video to be a help to anyone who is just feeling a bit unsure with how to tackle it. So here are my 5 tips to help you deal with approaching the subject of racism and how you can engage with it. Apologies for these bangles, by the way. I just really wanted to wear them but realised they're probably super noisy, so anyway. So number one, what is number one? So number one is to see that there's a problem, because I was thinking about all the tips that I could give and like, oh well, these are all like kind of potentially quite superficial tips, but if you don't see that it's a problem to begin with, you won't have a desire really to change or to address these issues or to learn more. To see that there's a problem is the first step. Racism still affects and impacts people even if it doesn't directly impact and affect you. Yeah, it always seems a bit too obvious to be like, human beings are getting mistreated and that's wrong. So that's number one, there's a problem. Number 2 is lay down your defenses. So for me, this really hits close to home, especially recently, because naturally I'm quite a joker. You might have realized that from especially the last video, but I don't want my banter to be at someone else's expense, because that's not banter, that's just being mean. So I've been joking with one of my friends who's black, and as an Asian person talking to a black person, you can feel like, oh, we bond over both being ethnic minorities. And so I joke with her, oh hey, this thing, which wasn't a thing, is a microaggression, and I'd say after every little thing, oh, it's a microaggression, and treat it like a joke. It would happen like occasionally, but enough for it to be a thing. Some of you might not know what a microaggression is. It's sort of the phrase that someone might use to make you feel like you don't belong. So for instance, where are you from? No, where are you really from? And I've had that before many times. People saying to me, hey, when are you going back home? And I'll say, oh, do you mean to Birmingham? No, home. And I'm just there like, I've actually never been to India. So there's loads of really awkward things like that, and it just can make you feel like, oh, I don't belong here and this isn't my country. One of my friends called me out. She's like, hey Kaylee, you know, sometimes when you say that, I know you don't mean it maliciously at all and you've got a really good friendship with this other person, but hey, did you think about how it could be affecting them? And I was like, oh no, they would tell me if something was wrong and like, it's a joke. But then I went and talked to my friend because I'd been thinking about it. I was like, actually, like, yeah, that I can see how that could be really hurtful, and by you making a joke out of it, it's not something that should be made a joke out of. So I apologized to my friend and I was like, hey, I'm really sorry if this has hurt you in any way. It's not my intention at all. Please, you know, forgive me. And that led to a really great conversation and has led to so many more, especially over the recent weeks. And man, I'm so grateful for that friendship and that relationship, and I'm so grateful for my friend who pointed out in the first place. The whole thing about laying down your defenses is because if I had reacted, and this isn't in any way to big myself up, but actually I'm using my failings as an example to hopefully help you, that if I'd said, when my friend challenged me on the way that I was using the word microaggression. Oh hey, I'm not racist, I didn't mean it that way, and got really defensive and didn't actually look, okay, how are my words being perceived and why am I feeling the need to make that joke? Then it wouldn't have been a growing point for me. It would have been a point that would have damaged friendships, and I would have just remained stuck in my ways, and it just wouldn't have been a good experience. So I'm so glad to have learned from that, like that laying my defenses down can be such a positive thing. And I mean, no one's perfect, right? And no one expects you to be perfect. We're all gonna be making mistakes, right? In relationships. But if you just come before people with a very humble attitude and like, hey, I'm really sorry if I've offended you or hurt you. I can't fully empathize in the sense of my experience is not your experience and vice versa, but I'm just gonna hear you and I'm just gonna value your opinion and value your experience and just listen. Point number 3 is to educate yourself. And now for me, at first I was like, oh my gosh, there's so much literature out there about this topic, so many books that have been recommended. I'm not a massive reader, although I will link some of the books that have been recommended to me down in the description. I found talks and interviews really helpful. I find that taking in information that way really sticks in my mind. I think it's really important to see the value in educating yourself on this topic, and especially when this conversation, it's about race, but it's also about particularly how the black community have been affected by so many things in culture. And it's easy to say, oh, I've got a black friend, or I've got an ethnic friend, whatever that means, and to say, oh yeah, I'm just gonna go ask them this question that I have. And that can be fine if your friend is up for talking about it and you have that sort of relationship. But a thing that was really key for me to understand, again, something that I picked up through listening to interviews and talks, and thinking about it now, it totally makes sense. Having maybe your brothers stopped and searched just because they're black, whereas their white counterpart would never have been, or is less likely to have been searched, and various things like that, as well as all the financial inequalities. And there's so many things that are unjust. When that builds up over time, it can be really exhausting to talk about that experience, and painful as well. Although they might be your black friend, they're also the friend to many people, and so maybe they've been getting a lot of questions, and maybe they're still trying to process it and deal with the hurt, the anxiety and the frustration and maybe anger that they're feeling. They might not want to talk to you about it, and that's cool, that's fine. And actually it's not their responsibility to educate you, it's yours. And I say this completely not pointing the finger. I've had to learn this, that like it's my job to educate myself on this issue and to not rely on other people to be giving me that information. So yeah, I'll link some really good talks in the description as well that I found useful. And also there are loads of different resources on various social media platforms. There are videos, audiobooks, actual physical books, and loads of resources. So there's really no excuse for not getting more informed, because there's literally so much out there. So I've actually realised, sorry, through doing this, that maybe I appear a bit glum. I'm not meant to be glum, but it just feels a bit of a weird topic to be really hyped and preppy about, because yeah, there's a place for being joyful, but I think there is a weight that comes with actually looking at how society has been and seeing how far we have left to go. Although we've come a long way in a sense, there's still a long way to go. It's sort of when you look at society and you think, oh, actually there are things in here that I didn't realise were racist, but actually looking back on it, seeing the systemic racism play out, I'm like, oh yeah, bro, that's the thing. I feel like I've not been the one that's been directly affected, although even my mum and my grandparents, especially because they're both first generation migrants, have had experiences where racism has been really bad and affected them. The area that I grew up in was very multicultural, and I never felt like, oh, I'm that brown kid. So number 4 is soul searching. This is not meant to be a navel-gazing exercise, but to just sort of look at yourself and look at your own attitudes and to see, where are my prejudices? Because I do have some, you know? I think everyone has natural prejudices, whether that's because of the environment they were raised up in or their own experiences, but I think everyone does have prejudices. That's okay to admit, because we all have them, but to just be like, okay, I'm gonna look and address those. And I like with microaggression, I've had to do that with myself, even in the language that I use, like where are these words coming from, and things that are filtered down into cultural vocabulary. So I was talking to one of my friends and I was like, oh hey, maybe I want to go work in a third world country, and she was like, hey Kaylee, what do you mean by third world? And I was like, oh wait, I've never really thought about where the origin of that word comes from, that phrase comes from, and loads of things like that, which now is being brought to the fore through all of the conversations that have been happening, which is so important. When I'm using my words, the words that I use are important, and why am I using the language that I'm using? Is it appropriate for the context that I'm in and for what I mean to express? For those of you who aren't of Southeast Asian, I don't know if that's the right term for being half Indian and half Sri Lankan, but I think you're sort of in the mix. You're kind of a bit white because you don't have the same prejudices I feel put against you as maybe black people, but then equally, like within Asian culture, at least from my experience, there is a low-key racism to black people, or maybe it's not that low-key, but like the words that even are used to describe black people are derogatory terms, or can be used as derogatory terms. The expression, oh you're black or you're fair, to say that someone's fair is to say that they're beautiful, but to say someone's dark, that's not such a great thing, because historically, especially in, you know, India and Sri Lanka, if you were darker, were more likely to have been maybe a manual labourer or something like that, maybe on the tea estates, and you're going to be out in the sunlight. But maybe if you had a higher paid job or you were of a higher class, you would be fairer. And in India it's a big thing to have skin bleaching products like the lotions that will make you fairer, and just that, even that whole mindset, you're like, whoa, where does that come from and why is that a thing, and just unworking that. So I think the soul searching is really important, because there's a lot of stuff that we've grown up with that isn't right, and don't know that it's not right until you challenge it. And number 5, change of heart. It's really great to be talking about educating yourself and looking at the language that you use and all of these potentially external changes, but actually I think what's really important to consider is inward change. Some people might say, oh, when they're talking, oh that just came out, or I didn't mean to say that, or I don't know where that came from. But I really think that people don't say things that aren't already in them, and that there's a verse in the Bible that talks about out of the overflow of the heart the mouth speaks. I've really seen that in practice, either in my own life and in the lives of those around me. And this doesn't just apply to language, it applies to actions as well. I think you act in line with your beliefs. So when we're talking about heart change, there's this whole idea that could be potentially easy to stray into, which is, I'm scared about saying this thing because I don't want to come across as racist. I totally get that idea and where that is coming from, but I think what's more important, rather than labeling people as racist, because I think people are so scared of being called that they avoid the topic and avoid talking about this issue and potentially learning more as well. But actually it's saying, hey, this is an area right now that you can work on. And for some people, you know, maybe they've not had the life experiences that mean they're sensitive to other people's cultures, or maybe just not that informed on other people's experiences, so they say things out of that ignorance. That doesn't make you an awful person that everyone hates, but actually it's a point for you to learn, and it's a point for you to grow. The point is not to shame people into silence, I think, and I really get that from talks, interviews that I've been listening to. The aim, isn't to shame people into silence so they don't engage with the conversation when they don't know much about the problems that there are in culture, for instance, about systemic racism. What's more important than to avoid being labelled racist is that your heart changes, and is to think, actually, hey, where is this coming from? Like, where are these words or these beliefs that maybe some people aren't quite as equal as other people? To actually think, okay, where is this coming from, is so important. There's an element to which part of my language and vocabulary and the way that I see the world is, it's not fully formed, but there are parts in it that, you know, I've had since I was a child. It's difficult to unpick your language, and I think for those things that are so, you can feel so ingrained, like, oh, I can never change. But for me, one thing that is really helpful is God. And it might seem like, whoa, that's a bit of a left field, but like I said, there are prejudices that we all have, and some that we don't even realize that we have. But I see God as the only one who doesn't have any prejudice. Like, he sees us all as equal, and he loves us all as equal. And I'm like, hey Jesus, like, when you were on the earth, the way that you lived was so, like, you treated people equally, in the sense of you loved them all equally, and you were the perfect example. So please help me, because I know that you can change me, and you can change my heart, you can change the things that even I don't think I can change about myself, to help me love other people better and love your world better. That for me is such a freeing thing, because I know, hey, okay, I'm not a hopeless case. I can feel like, oh, like, I'm not there yet, I'm not as prejudice free as I would like to be, but because of Jesus, I know that there's hope for me. Hey guys, I was just editing the video and actually realised that there's a point that would fit in really well and that I'd sort of missed out. So a cheeky bonus point for you guys, that love acts. We've been talking a lot about just educating ourselves and becoming more aware, but I think that knowledge, although it's great, it's sort of a bit pointless if it doesn't lead us to act. And maybe for you that looks a whole host of ways. It could be maybe joining in a protest, joining in with a petition. There's a lot that we can't control as much as we would like to, and I'd like to see things change. But one thing is that, as sort of previously been mentioned, is we can control our own attitude, but then also maybe stretching out to your wider circle. And if someone, a friend, a family member says something that is racist or slightly prejudiced, to just address it and just be like, hey, in a really kind and calm and loving way, to just address it, be like, hey, I don't know if you've thought about this, but when you say this, like, that's kind of not okay, and here's why. And but then also alongside of those sort of things where we're working within our own circles of influence, not being afraid to petition policymakers and get change on a bigger level. But just would encourage you that love acts. I feel like that's quite a nice way to round up. Moving forward, there are so many ways that we can help raise our voices alongside those who are being oppressed and treated unfairly. So with that, I will leave you. Much love.